Melissa Harrison here with the latest edition of our Religion Unplugged podcast. Today we go to São Paulo, Brazil, where we find our executive director, Paul Glatter, joined by journalist Marilia Cesar. Marilia is a financial journalist at the newspaper Valor. She's written about religion and has authored 4 books. We want to take a few moments to learn more about her and her work. So let's join her conversation with Paul, where she's talking about her first book and the thesis behind it.
My first book is about people who were wounded in the name of Christ. This is the title, Wounded in the Name of Christ. And it is about these bad experiences some Christians had in neo-Pentecostal churches, which are growing a lot in Brazil and in whole South America. So I myself attended a church like that for many years, and at some point I realized that the pastors were having very abusive relationships with the Christians, and that catched my attention, and then I felt that I should write about that. So it was a very successful book for Brazilian standards. It sold a lot, and I believe it helped a lot of other Christians who were having the same experience in other churches, but they didn't know how to talk about that. So this was my first book.
Wow, yeah. I think, this is parallel to our experience, many of our experience in the U.S. as well, with let's call it spiritual abuse or something. And I think in our context, it takes the form of sometimes money, pastors using money inappropriately, or using power in the way they advise people, or even sexual abuse. We have the Me Too movement in our society. That's, leaders in media, business have been brought down from power because of it, but also in the church, and Catholic Church and the Protestant church. But what a lot of times we hear, people are pained when we see a leader fall in the Christian church. It feels terrible, because you wonder, does it turn people away from the message of the gospel or the church? But what was your experience as the book came out and was successful, sold very well? What impact did it have on the church in Brazil, do you think? And what was the response from Christian people?
I think the response was very positive, in the way that many churches came to me to ask for seminars and presentations about the subject of the book, so I could go to some churches to talk about that. And here in Brazil, we have, as in U.S., this financial abuse as well, a lot. We have some very well-known leaders that do this prosperity theology, and they are famous for asking money for everything, and teaching how to bargain with God for asking God his favors, and in exchange of money, right? This is typical of the prosperity churches. But my book talks as well about people who are very, childish, not mature Christians that need to give the oh my God, sorry about my English, is not so good. People who want a guru, someone to look after her, everything, every field of her life, and someone to tell him who to marry, what job to accept, what profession to follow, like specific areas of his life, and ask advice for everything.
Yeah.
So this is very easy to. The abuse happens very easily when you have so many immature Christians, right? So it's not only in the financial area, but in the emotional area there is a lot of abuse, also because people are immature.
Yes.
And I think this is still happening a lot, and I believe it could be the occasion for a second edition of the book.
Yes.
Because it's near 10 years now of the publication.
Yeah.
So it's still going on, and these churches are still growing, so it's really a big problem.
Yes. Well, it's a big problem all around, and I'm especially. I grew up also, and I can relate to your experience because I grew up in this kind of thing, and even family members of mine are involved in lawsuits against a leader of something like you're describing in the U.S., and it's sad for kids who are raised in it, who don't really have the choice, They're just indoctrinated in it. That affects our view of God, So let's talk about one of your other, I think it was your second book you told us about, related to a hot topic, which is gay people and God. A lot of our listeners, like me, we have friends who are both Christian and gay. And where is their place in the church? Nobody likes to talk about it, but you wrote a book about it. So what did you say in your book?
Yes, this was a big problem for me in the beginning, and I think this discussion here in Brazil, it's only in the beginning, not as advanced as it is in America or in other European countries. It's very much in the beginning, and unfortunately, because we have been having this problem for a long time. What do I call a problem? This hidden Christians, they are like these guys inside the churches. They cannot say who they are, they cannot say how they feel, and their conflicts, their anguish, because they don't find the environment warm enough to hear their doubts, their questions about this homosexuality area of themselves. And when I started with this research, many pastors, friends of mine, they said, "Oh, don't do that, don't write about that, because this is a mind area. You are going to be like, they are going to throw stones in you." Nobody likes to talk about this because it's a very stigmatized area, and it will be very difficult for you. But I thought, I every time I want to write a book, I pray a lot before writing, and I always ask God, what should I write about? What is the subject that can make a difference, can help people who are suffering? Because I don't want to write about anything. You can write about anything, right? But there are only a few topics that can really go to the heart of these people, and I wanted to be used by God with my writing on helping this suffering, people who suffer inside the church. And I believe my work is a little bit I am not comparing to him, because he is like an idol to me, Philip Yancey, but I really try to follow his steps because he writes wonderful books and he questions these important things inside the church, right? So this was a very important and special book for me, because I found really wounded people in this area of homosexuality and sexuality, and who are pastors, who are people really faithful, not like Christians, pretend Christians, really real Christians who take things seriously and who were suffering with this area of sexuality. And I tell their stories in the book. And then I heard theologists, I heard psychologists, and people many different areas, to hear all the different opinions about this subject.
So in both these first books, so the audience knows you're a journalist, and you told us also you do some religion writing in the business newspaper too. But are you writing opinion, or you're doing reporting? It sounds like interviewing. What's a little bit on your methodology for these books and for your religion articles in the newspaper?
In the newspaper, we have a weekly session called it's like Me and Culture, and it's like a small magazine of cultural subjects. And every time I find the opportunity to suggest a story or an interview with someone who is preeminent in some area or some subject that is like hot in the Brazilian news agenda, I try to suggest people to talk a little bit about the religious aspects of that subjects. And so I did some good interviews, I think, for this session. Many times, interviewing like Christian scientists and Christian theologists to discuss about prosperity, theology, and other subjects that the newspaper doesn't really cover, because they don't have anyone to write about these questions in the newspaper. So it is a very cherished work for me, because every time I try to find an opportunity, how do we say in Portuguese, one gancho, like the opportunity to write about that, because there is another subject going on. And I think the newspaper is happy with those stories as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's so wonderful to hear, because that's exactly the mission, part of our mission at the Media Project, is to encourage people to do exactly what you're doing, which is to see how religion fits in the coverage, and that it's a topic that needs to be included. And so it sounds exactly like you're doing that here. I wanted to hear also about this book, about a person you told us about that I'm now fascinated with, a woman in politics here named Marina Silva. And for American listeners, you might think about someone like Aaron Brockovich, the movie, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a young politician who just rose. This Marina is some combination of that. But let's hear about the story and the subject of your book on Marina Silva. Was it called Marina, the book?
Yes.
Okay, Marina.
Yes.
And who is this woman? Tell us. Okay, tell us about her.
The book is called Marina, Life with a Cause. And I wrote, it's like a biographical report. It's not like a definite biography. And it was written while she was a minister of the environment during the first mandate of Lula president, who were like a left-wing president, a very famous left leader here in Brazil, popular. And Marina was raised in the Amazon jungle in a small state called Acre, very poor state of Brazil, inside the Amazon area, which is very big. It includes like 4 or 5 states of Brazil, the Amazon forest. And Marina learned she came from the forest, literally, and her father was like a rubber producer, how do you say, seringueiro, who takes the latex from the trees that produce the latex to make the rubber.
Wow.
And they were like a very poor family living inside the forest, and she wanted, since she was a child, to study, to learn, to read, and she couldn't read because they were all illiterate. They couldn't read or write, and she manages to go to the capital of Acre, and with a lot of trouble she learned how to read and write when she was 16. And this woman is like an example of separation, of strength, of someone who really fought for her life. Many times she got very gravely sick, and she nearly died with serious diseases that she got in the forest. And her life is like a movie, theme, right? And I sold the rights of the book for a movie maker here in Brazil, a woman. But unfortunately, because Marina was, she broke with the left party that she belonged to. She broke with PT, and she went to the opposition, doing opposition to the PT government, which was starting to get accusations of corruption. And she went to the opposition, and because of that, no one wanted to sponsor the movie about her life, because the business people were afraid of being turned apart if they put money in the movie regarding Marina's life. They were afraid of being how do you say, marginalized, like in the business, right? Yeah. And so there is this roteiro, I don't know how to say roteiro, of the film, of the movie about her life based in the book. So I wrote her story. I interviewed her many times. She became a Christian when she was 40 years old. She came from a Catholic background, but she converted to Assembleia de Deus, God Assemblies Church, and she's a very, very faithful Christian now. And many Brazilians don't like her specifically because of that, because they think she is a fundamentalist, she is not so open-minded, and that is not true. Yeah. I can tell you that is not true.
Wow. You told us you had access and long interviews with her for this, and I'm curious, I saw she ran for president 3 times, including last year, and was at one point looked was doing very well. As we know, you guys have Jair Bolsonaro now as president here. He's also using evangelical voters as one part of his base. They call the man Trump of the tropics up in our part of in the North America. That's what we call him. I'm curious about her odds in the future. Do you think she wants to, as someone who knows her, who wrote a biography of her, does she want to continue in politics, or is she steering, and may she run again for president, or is she steering away toward other things now?
Well, I couldn't tell precisely, but as far as I know, I don't believe she will run again for president, because the message she got last year in the elections were very negative. She went very badly. She got 1% only of the votes, because she was seen as too soft woman. They wanted someone like a macho style for president, a macho man, tough guy, like to address Brazilian many problems that we have of violence and corruption. And Brazilians voted for like a macho, who is like our president now, Jair Bolsonaro. His speech is it's a violent speech, and his favors like everybody has access to guns, and he's not, in some points it can be like compared to Trump, but like Trump has a very strong party and Bolsonaro has a really tiny little party and not expressive at all. So you could not really compare him to Trump, right? And as far as I see, Marina will be like in the opposition, helping to confront this actual government, because it is a government with many problems.
She's still in the government?
No, she is not. She belongs to a party that she helped to create that is called Rede, that means like network. It means network. And she is trying with this very small party as well to do the opposition against Bolsonaro. But with the message she received last year, very little votes, I don't believe she will run again. But I might be wrong. You never know.
Yeah. My last question for you before we wrap up, Marilia, is what are your new projects, either books or topics you're working on for the newspaper?
Well, I am working now. I'm starting to research about female submission. How can you read these passages, Bible passages that talk about female submission today in the 21st century, with the empowered women and this speech of women empowerment, and with specifically in Brazil, we have really terrible statistics about violence against women. They are really bad, like 90 cases of aggression against women only in São Paulo every day, right? So many of these ladies are evangelical women, and they like get beaten by their husbands or partners, and they go to the church to complain for the pastors. Look, he's beating me, what should I do? And the pastors say, oh, you should pray for him, that he should be a better husband, that he really get converted, he comes to Christ and become a better man. So she will spend the rest of her days getting beaten and praying for her husband, right? So the statistics says that around 40% of the women on the violence, domestic violence cases here in Brazil are evangelicals. So these are terrible figures. So I want to write about that. What is the role of the church in helping to sustain these figures, right? And how could the churches address this question with another look, with another deal differently on this? Because as you know, Brazil has a very machist culture, and these figures for me are really terrible. So I wanted to write about that. This is my next project, and it has a title already. It will be called Eve's Daughters.
Oh, wow. Very cool. This is another important book, and I wish some of these were in English or get translated at some point, because this is very important topics. And it's been such a pleasure to meet you this week and to be in Brazil with the Media Project. I want to say a few words that we had a great week here with Ronaldo Aragon from Peru was in town. Wesley Parnell from New York, our photojournalist and journalist, came with and is going to be snapping a photo soon of Marilia. If you're hearing little dog barking noises or engines revving, it's because we're sitting at a cafe outside of church before going to church with Marilia and our friend Sergio. Sergio has been awesome showing us around the city, and he's a social media influencer and involved in the book industry here. And I want to have him tell our listeners where they can, if you read Portuguese and you want to read these books by Marilia, where can they best find them? Sergio, and you want to make a quick comment about her work and where they can find her books?
I think you can follow me on Twitter, Pavarini, or Facebook, Sergio Pavarini. On Instagram, Sergio Pavarini. It's very easy because on Google, if you put my name, you can follow me, or you can find my blogs and texts or something like that. It was a very great pleasure to stay with you during this marvelous week. God bless you so much.
Thank you, Sergio. And for Marilia's books, I found them all on Amazon if you want to buy them.
Yes.
And thank you so much again, Marilia. Great to meet you this week.
Thank you. It was very nice meeting you. And the work that you're doing, I think, is great. We really need this work of training more people, more journalists to write about aspects of religion, the importance of religion in the social and cultural areas that are not being covered properly by the other journalists that are not like Christians or religious.
Well, thanks again, everyone. And for Religion Unplugged from São Paulo, Brazil, this is Paulo Glader saying ciao.
Once again, you've been listening to a conversation between our executive director, Paul Glader, and journalist Marilia Cesar. Please take a moment to follow our podcast and like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check us out online at religionunplugged.com and themediaproject.org.